Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, brought to you by Music Ally, the show that's fascinated by the fun and games and finances of the music world, as explained each week by me, Steve Lamack, and him, Stuart Dredge. If you want an easy guide to what's going on in the music biz and how it all works, then here we are. Although I've been a little bit out of the loop this week because I was away for a few days before having to come back to London for my mandatory BBC hearing test on Friday.
Oh, wow.
No jokes, please. Have you ever had that? You must have had a hearing test at some point, Stu.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, what does it involve? Is it? I remember I had one a long time ago, and they said, "Oh, you've lost this frequency because of going to concerts." And
Right? Yeah.
You must have lost more frequency than I have going to concerts.
Well, this is the strange thing. I mean, so the test is it's just you put a pair of headphones on and they play you a series of bleeps and noises which progressively get quieter. And the guy, there was a young guy, really nice fella, making notes on his laptop, and all the time you're straining to hear whether there's some tone, which you can just faintly make out. But then he showed me, obviously, there's a piece of software, I guess, which then produces kind of an automated result. And it said something like, warning, potential hearing loss or something. And he looked at us as I was looking at that, and he said, "Oh, it's all right, we haven't factored in your age yet." And he pressed a button that said 60, and all of a sudden everything's fine. And he just said to me, "Yeah, your hearing's fine, you can go." And
Hang on a minute.
That was the end of that.
Aren't you the man who wrote a book called Going Deaf for a Living? I'm calling fraud on that. You're not going deaf for a living.
Well, I've got no right to have reasonable, hearing by this point. But it turns out, as he said, your hearing's fine for a man of your age. Anyway, coming up this week, secondary ticketing, Bandcamp, China's version of Spotify is booming, Taylor Swift's secret negotiating weapon, and a quick mention of badly sequenced albums, because we have a brilliant suggestion from one of our listeners. Thank you, Ben. We'll come to that in a second. First, though, and you suggested coming back to this topic because we rather threw this away last week, but it will include some big figures. It's Coldplay's run of 10 sold out shows at London's Wembley Arena, which, I mean, in news terms has been slightly overlooked in the cascade of Oasis stories, but it's no mean feat, is it? This can we crunch some numbers involved with this run of shows?
Yeah, we can. So I got two big figures. The first is $400 million, and that is how much Coldplay made from their tour last year alone, elsewhere in the world. Mm-hmm. It was top of Billboard's tours list, or there was a big asterisk there, and they didn't have the numbers from Taylor Swift in yet.
Right.
I think she probably was the biggest tour, but they were $400 million. But yeah, the other thing is playing 10 nights at Wembley and 2 in Hull. Interesting, which is kind of, I think, the sort of warm up. But their warm up gigs are playing a 12,000 stadium in Hull.
Yeah.
So the other big number is 900,000 people are going to see it at Wembley. So the capacity is 90,000.
Yeah.
10 nights. I'm not sure. I was going to look up, has anyone ever done more nights at Wembley in a single run? I remember Rob Williams did some, didn't he? How many did Oasis do? They're doing 7?
So how many have they done so far? 5, and they're going back to do a couple more, I think. So yeah roughly 7 somewhere.
But it is, I think, like you say, it's underreported. I wonder if that's because Coldplay have never been away. They've basically been constantly touring, haven't they?
I mean, this tour feels like it's been going on for years. I mean, it must be 2 years in by now, because they keep going round and round the world, it feels like.
And the other good thing, I was reading an interview this morning. I think the NME had, I don't know if it's an interview, they had some quotes from the tour program, but it was all about the angle that the grassroots venue donation stuff.
Oh, right.
So from playing to these, I think it's 924,000 people, if it's all set up. 10% of their profits are going to the Music Venue Trust.
Yeah.
So, which I think, and I've been looking at how much is that, and even Mark, he didn't know how much it would be. It depends on the cost of the shows and everything like that. But it's going to be a huge donation that's actually going to keep some small venues open that were closed. That's what he said.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing here. The big numbers around the fans is going to actually save some small venues from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to give a lot of credit, I think, to the band and the management for doing this, because I mean, it essentially recognises where they came from. I think because Coldplay, so many bands, started out in the pubs of London. I first saw them at a venue called the Falcon. And then the Bull and Gate in Kentish Town, and neither of those are venues now. The Falcon is flats, and the Bull and Gate is a gastropub. And they did that tour, didn't they? Which did you see them on this tour with Terrace? Do you remember they
I
did a
saw them at
tour with
a
Terrace?
ULU, a
Right.
university venue, so not quite the same. But yeah,
Right.
that was my first
But
time.
I think they did. They did a tour where they did, venues again, some of which aren't there anymore. The Princess Charlotte in Leicester, I think, was on that tour, and that's no longer there. So, yeah, I think you have to applaud that. And I mean, hopefully, more bands are going to follow the lead. I mean, it was Enter Shikari, I think, who first committed to giving £1 from all of their ticket sales to the Music Venue Trust. And now, of course, we have the Live Trust, which is the charitable trust set up by Live, which is the live music industry trade body, again, to allow artists and promoters to contribute £1 a ticket from stadium and arena gigs to a fund which will then be distributed amongst the main players in the grassroots ecosystem, so venues and artists and promoters as well. My Chemical Romance, do you notice they've recently become one of the bands who've committed to giving £1 a ticket from their shows as well, and they're big old gigs, them gigs. But well done, Coldplay. Anyway, here we go. After much deliberation, here's our top 3 news stories of the week, starting with this. Secondary ticketing firm StubHub has been in the news for, several reasons, some less positive than others. Can you explain very quickly who StubHub are and what they do?
Yeah, so StubHub is one of the biggest, or probably the biggest, secondary ticketing firms. So they have a platform where you can go on and sell tickets for events, and people can buy them, and they can be priced whatever you like. They can be priced like higher than they would have gone on sale for before. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously quite a controversial area. There's been a lot of talk about are these companies helping people to basically screw fans, making them pay. So that's the key thing. These are platforms. So people go on who have tickets to sell, people go on tickets to buy. They're not selling the tickets themselves. But they're providing the platform, which is one of those ways where you can end up saying, well, it's not our fault what happens here. We're just providing the space for it. So yeah, the big story is a financial one. It's going public. And this has actually been coming from London. So we want to become a public company through an initial public offering where basically sell shares to investors and the public.
Right.
And it's been rumoured for ages, kept getting delayed. And earlier this year, it filed for this IPO. You have to basically do a filing saying, we are going to go public. Here is all the information investors will need. So, and they've just refiled that filing. Refiling the filing, that's an album title. Which suggests 2 things. It means the IPO is back on. They're going to go public. Maybe as soon as next month, according to some reports. But it also gives us some new numbers on how big StubHub is, how many tickets are being sold. So I've got a bunch of those numbers.
So in terms of the amount of tickets, so essentially they host the people who are trying to resell. They give a space for people who want to resell their tickets, which I mean, loads of people are doing it now. But what are we up to then? What's the stats, and what are they? I suppose they've been waiting to get big enough that investors will want to pour their money in, are they?
That's it, yeah. So last year, more than 40 million tickets were sold on StubHub. And that's $8.7 billion worth of sales.
Right.
There's a term for which like growth, like how many things they don't keep. That's not their revenues. Their revenues are like 300 and something million because they only keep a small percentage. But and that is, and like you say, it could be me if I have a Coldplay ticket for Wembley and I can't go. I could go on StubHub and sell it. But it's also the controversy comes when it's companies whose businesses buying and selling tickets, like so making a profit. And some of those companies have an absurd amount of tickets to sell. And people say, how did you get all those tickets? So those 40 million tickets, some of it is just people selling tickets they can't go to anymore. But other things are commercial operations.
Yeah, which brings us to the other story, isn't it? Which is, well, there was it a guy who was selling about 300 tickets for a Lewis Capaldi show. And did he even have the 300 tickets? Well, I don't know, but this is the can of worms, isn't it? And this is the problem with StubHub and I imagine Viagogo as well, is when people are using it for profit, brutally using it as a part of their business plan.
Well, this is it. So Lewis Capaldi, obviously, he's just come back after a big hiatus, and his gigs sold out in a matter of minutes when they were announced. And yet there was a company selling tickets via StubHub. And they had 306 seats for the first night alone. And they were selling them for like more than 3 times their face value.
Wow.
And yeah, you're right. It's two things. Either they got hold of 306 tickets, which is actually, it's very hard to do that legally. Like there are limits. Often there's, 6 per purchaser and that sort of thing.
Mm,
We're quite used to that now. So either they got hold of tickets and no one's quite sure how and what tactic season they may be illegal, or they were listed in speculative. And the speculative ticketing is a phrase here where you don't own them yet. You're just listing it that you will sell them and you will get them. And so you're listing something you don't own. And both of these things are a big legal headache, both for StubHub and for the people selling them. I think the Guardian did an investigation, said we found these listings, and we're like, how do they get these tickets if they have them at all? So what happened was StubHub removed the listings after being contacted, and it said that it doesn't allow people to do speculative ticketing. It doesn't allow people to list things they don't actually own to resell.
mm,
But all of this is fueling, in the UK, but also elsewhere, there's a debate about calls for reform. Like, how should these companies be regulated? Should there be more stiffer regulations on all this? Which kind of comes back to, if you're trying to go public and you're trying to get people to buy shares in your company, this sort of stuff, regulation, is a headache for you,
mm.
because you might, and that's why StubHub, Vigo, all these companies, they have a lot of people working as lobbyists to kind of convince politicians not to regulate in the way they want. They have a lot of, they put that stuff out in research saying, look, here's how we do is positive. Lots of research coming out of these companies saying we're brilliant. So it's a very, very big operation in terms of the, I guess, the PR and the courting of politicians to say, look, don't crack down on us. We're good. We're not bad. But every time these reports come up, I think everyone looks at it and goes, that doesn't feel fair that there's 306 tickets for this amazing, this gig that everyone wants to go to.
Yeah.
3 times the value. So it's
interesting. It's interesting timing if it is happening in the next month, because also, and I don't think there's ever been a point where people have been more aware or more annoyed by secondary ticketing, because I think post Oasis, it was the Oasis bun fight which brought this back into public focus, wasn't it? I think, and also brought it back into the minds of government. I think Labour had in their manifesto had said we're going to look into secondary ticketing, but post Oasis, where even MPs were grumbling about not being able to get tickets. Since then, obviously, the Labour government said, "Well, yeah, we're going to look into," and they're in the process at the moment of compiling a report about secondary ticketing, which may, the suggestion is, it may result in a recommendation to price cap how much you can make on reselling tickets. I think it's basically, I think the idea is the amount, if you can lower the amount of profit that people are making by reselling a ticket, if you cap it, then I think they hope that if there's less money in reselling tickets, if you can't inflate the prices by stupid amounts, that will put the touts off. But this will all depend on where the price cap is. Because if it's 30%, I don't think that's going to put touts off. If it's 10%, then you've got a chance of, I think, damaging their business enough that they'll go and do something else.
That's it. That's always the way, isn't it? Make it easier to do something else. I mean, that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with reselling tickets. And actually, as a fan, if you can't go to something, there are now ways you can do that without, Twickets is one we've talked about. Yeah. I think Ticketmaster have a fee. Dice has a way of making a ticket. Like, there are now ways, if you can't go to a gig, to sell it without charging someone else loads of money.
Yeah.
And this is about companies making a profit from this business. And I think a lot of us would look at that and go, actually, yeah, I don't mind if they go out of business. It's a good business to be in. Not I mean, the people buying and selling these tickets purely for profit.
Yeah.
I really am relaxed about them not being cracked down on.
It's the irritation, isn't it? When your average music fan who tries to buy a ticket, having waited in a queue, doesn't get the ticket, but within seconds there are 100 tickets for that gig at massively inflated prices on sites like this. Story 2 this week, the latest Bandcamp Friday promotion generated $3.5 million of music and merch sales for independent artists. I think this is something which began in lockdown, but for anyone who doesn't know the score, tell us briefly about, I'm sure everyone knows what Bandcamp is, but tell us about Bandcamp and their Bandcamp Fridays.
Yeah, I mean, if even one person doesn't know what it is, it's exciting to tell them about it because it's a wonderful thing. So yeah, Bandcamp has been historically a place where independent artists and labels can set up their stores, can't they? And they can sell music and merch directly to fans. And then during the pandemic, you're right. It was basically they were like, okay, well, this Friday we're going to waive our fee. So I think Bandcamp gets 15% of your digital sales and 10% physical, which is a decent. It's not an absurd revenue share to take, but it waives those for one day, so that artists can get more of the money. And that became a thing. And it became this big promotion and people look forward to it. And artists started preparing releases specifically for it. And it became an event. And I think so far they were doing them every month, I think, at the height of the pandemic. And then they've been not quite so often since then, but they've carried on doing them. And they've done more than $140 million of sales so far on this day. And all of that money has then gone to the artists and labels, minus the kind of payment processing fees. But yeah, so the latest one was on 1st of August. They did $3.5 million. And what I think is important about that is that it's up from, it was $3.2 million for the last one in May. And I think you could assume, okay, they started this in the pandemic, it will dwindle over time because as we get further away from lockdowns, we don't, but it's not, it's growing. And it's become this thing that isn't just about lockdowns and pandemics. It's about, here's a day we're going to come together and celebrate and get people to come. And the thing I like about Bandcamp is that they've built this community of people who want to pay artists money. And that feels important at a time when there's lots about how artists are struggling in all kinds of ways. So that's one thing. But they did this announcement of this figure. And then buried near the bottom was like, oh, by the way, we've got a new thing coming. And they sort of trailed this upcoming feature, which I think is quite interesting.
Which is what?
So it's called Bandcamp Clubs. And they said it's basically a new way for fans to discover music, connect more deeply with artists and each other, and explore monthly selections curated by trusted tastemakers, which I sort of read that and thought, I wonder if it's like a subscription thing. Do you pay a monthly subscription? You get some music curated for you. But it could be something different. But they're obviously planning something that like takes what they do to the next level. And that is, again, quite exciting. I mean, I can't remember how long it was. It was a couple of years ago now, maybe. But Bandcamp used to be independent. Then they got bought by Epic Games, which is a company that owns Fortnite. And that was always like, what's that about? Why they bought Bandcamp? And then it sold them to another company called Songtrader. And I remember at the time, there was a lot of worry about who are these people who've bought Bandcamp? What are their intentions? Are they going to run it into the ground and ruin it? Or are they going to push it on? And this company, Songtrader, always said, no, we want to protect Bandcamp. We want to something. And actually, ever since, there's been no evidence of it getting worse, going terrible. It seems like they are putting more well into it, giving measurement and developing stuff. And as I say, I think it's, I mean, I can see lots of good things about streaming, and I'm not a kind of anti-streaming person, as people will know, but I think Bandcamp is a really important complementary thing to streaming for those artists, and that $3.5 million is tip of the iceberg of what it's providing. So, yeah.
Story 3 this week: China's Spotify, that's Tencent Music, now has 124.4 million people paying for music. Why is that a big deal for the music industry? I'm guessing because it was, China, you didn't sell a lot of records in China, but there was a lot of music being bootlegs or just passed around. Wasn't it home of piracy?
It was, yeah. So when I started writing about the industry, it was basically a kind of just a no-go area for selling music. And it was kind of like you had these big search engines, just basically we could go and search for MP3s and download them. Like, the equivalent here would have been if Google had a little box saying search for music and get it for free here. Like it was that was the level of it. You basically, no one paid for music because you go and just search. And this is something that only a certain kind of government can really do. But the Chinese government stepped in at one point and said, no, we're not going to have that anymore. Overnight made those services legal and said, you have to be licensed and legal. Right. And overnight they all became legal because that's kind of what the Chinese system is like. The government says and you jump. So Tencent Music is basically, it's sort of China's Spotify, except it has 3 different music streaming services. It's got one called QQ Music and one called Kugo and one called Kuwo. So it's got like 3 Spotifys.
Right.
And it also does live stream video and online karaoke, which is big in China, which isn't quite big here yet. Anyway, yeah, so it had its financial results. It's also a public company. It's got 553 million users of those services. And like you say, the key point is 124.4 million that are paying. And they're either paying for subscriptions or they're buying digital albums, which is also a thing in China. and that's growing by 26.4% year on year. So, like, China is now the fifth biggest recorded music market in the world. And actually, looking at the figures, it might overtake Germany to be the fourth biggest this year. And it could even overtake the UK in the near future if it keeps growing like this. Like, it's really on a surge. But there was another point I wanted to sort of tell you about, because, like, in their financial results, they've got this thing, and it's called SVIP. And it's kind of their super fan higher price subscription tier. So you can be a particularly keen user and you can pay extra. And it costs like 5 times the price of a subscription. So the equivalent here would be paying 55 quid for Spotify every month.
Wow.
And it has 15 million people doing that. Obviously the price is lower in China.
Yeah.
But it has these 15 million people saying we're going to pay for the most expensive subscription you have.
Crikey.
And that's interesting for us, because I think there was, in Universal Music Group's recent financial earnings call, they were talking about this and saying, look at that. This is proof. There's demand. If you have a higher price subscription with cool stuff in it, people will pay. And we want to see that in the West. And they're looking at Spotify and Apple and Amazon saying, look, it's working for Tencent in China. Do it here.
Does that necessarily follow, though? Because music fans are different the world over, and in their habits and what they want from pop music. So I don't know if it necessarily works here.
No, I don't think it's a guarantee. And there's quite a lot of there's some fascinating differences. Like in China, for example, that in streaming they have a huge comment sections. People who are on streaming services are commenting on songs, and there's huge sort of chat discussions about them. We don't have that here. It hasn't really got out of us. But I think it's at the very least it's kind of hang on, in this market where historically we had trouble getting people to pay for music, if a decent amount of them are now paying lots more for a subscription, why wouldn't it work in the West? You should try it. I think that's what's coming from the labels to the streaming.
Yeah.
And we know Spotify's working on its idea of a higher price subscription. So this is kind of like a little nudge saying, look, it's working in this specific part of the world. So let's see if it can go fly in the West.
Okay. Any other business? Actually, can I just mention, following on from what we prepared to pay for streaming, that we got a brilliant question from Simon Hemmelrick. That's possibly not how you pronounce your name, Simon. I apologise. Get in touch and put us right. But Simon, he's one of our listeners, sent us a question to answer, which is about how much money musicians are making in the streaming era, and is it actually as bad as people say? And that Simon put forward an argument about a particular Heritage Act and said, look, if you compare what they would have made then and what they would make now, surely they're still making loads of money. I'm not telling you who the artist is because I'm keeping you in suspense, because Simon, when we looked at it and started talking to some of our friends of the show who knew the answers to your question, it started spiraling out of all control because there's so many aspects to the question. So we're going to dedicate virtually a whole show to your one question in about 2 weeks' time, once we've finished properly researching it. But thank you for asking it. We will get there. Any questions for us, or if you're after tips on how to deal with the music industry machine, email address coming up later on. I know this was on your list, which is Stuart returning to a subject very close to his heart, which some would claim is the big music success story of the year. K-pop Demon Hunters have reached another huge milestone. What is it now? I've seen that they're putting the film in cinemas. Yeah. I mean, I daren't tell my daughter that. Otherwise, that's a
She's going to know. She's going to find out.
Yeah. K-pop Demon Hunters. Tell us more.
Even some will claim, I think we can get rid of now. It is the big story of the year. So just to refresh anyone who hasn't been, K-pop Demon, it's an animated film on Netflix. It launched in June. And it's about it's a mythical tale of women who are demon hunters, who do their demon hunting while also being a pop group. And then the demons are blokes who are also in a pop group, because you have to have a side hustle nowadays if you're a demon or a demon hunter.
Yeah,
because these two K-pop groups who are also indulged in demon hunting business, and it's been huge, and so is the soundtrack. So last week, Netflix actually put some numbers out and said the film has been watched more than 180 million times around the world. Right. And I guess there might be some parents listening who are going, "Yeah, 17 of those are my child."
or more,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack, so this came out with its own soundtrack because these two pop groups, fictional pop groups, each have their songs. And the soundtrack has got more than 3 billion streams so far globally since June. And to your point about this is the biggest story of the year. So right now, the biggest track from this soundtrack is called Golden. It's number 1 in the US on the Billboard chart. There are 4 songs in the top 20. Golden is number 1 in the UK this week, and there are 3 songs in the top 10.
Right.
Look at the Spotify chart globally. 3 of Spotify's 5 biggest songs at the moment are from K-pop Demon Hunters. And Golden's getting 7.5 million streams a day alone on Spotify. Like, this really has come from nowhere in many people's and is suddenly dominating the charts.
It's certainly struck a nerve with the kids.
Yeah. And now this, you mentioned the cinema event. It's not just a cinema screening; it's a sing-along cinema screenings across the US, across Canada. There's some in the UK, and like, do you remember? I don't know. I want to ask you this question for the joy of it. Have you ever been to one of those like Sound of Music sing-along cinemas?
No. What do you? I mean, I know we've only known each other for about 2 years, but I mean, look at you know me.
You might have a Sound of Music fan, but yeah, like we've seen it with the Sound of Music and the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but it's quite a recent phenomenon. Really.
But this is going to be kids though as well.
You know, we should do something on cinemas, because I think did we talk last week about it? This idea of cinemas are doing more music stuff now, like doing live concert. And like, one of the things I like about that is you are going to a cinema to the music you love, and everyone around you is from your area who also loves that music. It's like a community building thing, I think. So it's quite, it's going to be exciting for a kid to meet all the other kids in your area who know K-pop Demon Hunters, love it. But here's another stat. I got another stat for you on this.
Okay.
There was a survey of kids in the US recently, and they asked them what their favorite music genre is. And 25%, a quarter of US kids said K-pop is their favorite genre.
Yeah.
So it's really something that's flipped really fast. And this is part of it. BTS and Blackpink are part of it. But K-pop and the kids, it's like it's a big thing.
Can I very quickly mention badly tracklisted albums? We asked about this on the programme last week. This comes out of the Hayley Williams story, which we covered a fortnight or so ago, where Hayley put out, instead of releasing an album, released 17 individual tracks, so you could assemble your own version of the album. But we then said, what bands have clearly got their track listing wrong? We've had a few ideas put forward so far, but keep them coming. I mentioned this partly because this only recently came in, and I want to look at this in more detail before we discuss it. But thank you, Ben Cardew, who suggested 2 albums. The first being Discovery by Daft Punk, which is an album I've written a whole book about, says Ben.
Yes.
But track listing doesn't work. And then, more controversially, possibly, although producer Joe says, yeah, I'm with this, the record in Ben's mind, badly track listed, The Queen is Dead by the Smiths. We'll talk more about that in a week or so. But thank you very much, Ben. As I say, we are still open for more suggestions of badly track-listed albums. And here's something else from last week, because I lightly took the mickey out of you last week for getting up in the middle of the night to try and find out more details of the new Taylor Swift
took
album.
The mickey, I'd say, quite heavily.
Well, it was. I mean, and then you were saying the whole thing was about the Taylor Swift camp basically drip feeding information about the record, and this is how you announce albums these days over the course of a week, by giving a bit of information here, a bit of information there. But she was going on a podcast, which I imagine you listened to as well, did you?
I watched it. It was on YouTube.
Oh, of course.
Podcast nowadays is already. Yeah, she went on New Heights, which is actually her partner, Travis Kelce, and his brother. I think it's normally an American football podcast, but for one thing, they went into kind of. But yeah, she appeared on that, and it's 2 hours. Well, if I'm going to watch 2 hours of a podcast, I'd rather watch Taylor Swift than Joe Rogan. So it wasn't too bad.
Okay.
But yeah, so a lot of it was about like it's personal stuff, like how she and her partner met, and talking about life as a pop star. But there were a couple of music industry bits that I thought were interesting. So first, do you remember she bought back her recordings catalogue earlier this year?
Yes, yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Well, this little nugget came out. She said, she didn't send her lawyers in to negotiate that deal. She sent her mum and brother in.
Right.
Yeah,
Really?
Now, there's a caveat here. Like, her brother handles her film projects, and her mum is a key part of her management company. So it's not like sending anyone's mum and brother in who don't know anything about. They know their onions.
I was going to say, I'm hardly likely to get my old man to go in and negotiate my next 6 music contract. If
maybe that's it. One. It's like those footballers who have their dads or mums as their agents, isn't it? Maybe they work. But then she said it basically was to convey the emotion involved. She wanted them to realise that this was really personal for her. It wasn't just, But then also she talked about how, so this is something she's alluded to before, that like her long fight about owning her recordings has inspired younger artists. And she's talked about this thing about young artists come up to her and say, they say, I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't know you could own your recordings.
Yeah.
And then obviously, this is her to say, they're telling her that they've negotiated when they have a label deal to have their recordings revert back to them after a certain number of years or to own them outright. So I think we've talked about this before and said, well, it's difficult when you're an artist. Can you go into a label and say, I want to own my recordings? But according to Taylor Swift, people have seen what she's done and they've gone in and done exactly that.
Yeah, that's it. It is interesting, isn't it? More and more people are talking about reversion as well, which is when you sign your rights away, but only for a term of, I don't know, a decade or something. Which is strangely what we did at Deceptive Records with some of the deals we did. We said, well, we'll own them for 10 years and then you can have them back. I think we did that with Elastica actually.
It's kind of interesting because, like, in the industry right now, there's a lot of talk about how lucrative catalog is for labels.
Oh yeah,
and so
strangely, there's something about that which I'm going to raise in the lock-in for Patreon listeners in a bit. But yes, catalog. Sorry.
Yeah, so at the time when catalog is becoming even more important to labels, we're also having this discussion about artists want to have their catalogs back, and that's a point of tension. But the other thing I wanted to highlight is that if anyone wants to go and see this New Heights podcast, there's a whole section which is called Music Ownership Explained to Football Players. And where is it? It's where the two guys are like Travis Kelce, they're like, explain music ownership to us. And Taylor Swift does it. And if you're actually brand new to how music ownership works, that's quite a good place to start because she's explaining it in terms that football players would understand, and they're kind of asking questions. So it's a good primer.
We're nearly out of time. And finally, this week, what does a crunchy, soft-boiled quail's egg have to do with British rock band Alt J?
Well, you know how riders get out of control. No, crunchy soft-boiled egg is what I want to take you to with that. How do you have a crunchy soft-boiled egg, and that'd be good? But
I don't know.
Like, shells in it.
Yeah,
but this is. I don't know.
Isn't Gus from Alt J? Isn't he the one who is quite a foodie?
He is, and that's what this is about. So this is happening in East London because, of course, it is. If anyone knows East London, this is why. But he's curating a 5-course meal based on tracks from the band's albums. And it's at this place called The Collab, which is a restaurant that's been doing these partnerships with musicians and food. And so it is, you go along, you have a 5-course meal, everything is explained to you, and his explanations of how this relates to the album and the inspirations behind it. And so, classic Solerac remoulade, persimmon granita with cured mackerel and shiso, smoked buffalo shoulder, and buffalo blue cheese croquette. And just for us who are looking at this going, a Welsh cheese plate and classic tiramisu to finish. But it's such a limited thing. Obviously, you have to be able to go to East London and take part in this meal. But this is happening more and more. Like, artists who have a foodie interest are figuring out stuff they can do with that and events. And there's a little crossover between music and food around events, and it's quite fun.
Is there? I can't see it catching up. Mind you, this again begs a question. Albums and what food they would be. Let's leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you very much for listening. If you are enjoying what we're trying to do, please do spread the word, tell your friends, or leave us a review online if you get a chance. I mean, I know everyone gets asked twice a day to leave reviews for something or other online, but if you do have a couple of minutes, would be much appreciated. Alternatively, you can support us via Patreon. In fact, if you sign up to be a superfan, as mentioned, you get an extra 15 minutes or so of us pontificating over various music-related matters in the lock-in, which is coming up next for subscribers. If you'd like to join us, you can become a super fan at patreon.com/thepriceofmusic. Thank you very much to Gerard Gibbons, who's just come on board. If you'd like to, as I say, if you'd like to join Gerard and the rest of the gang, patreon.com the price of music. You can also get in touch with us via our socials, or drop us a line at this email address if you have any questions or any feedback for us, the price of music podcast at gmail.com. Till next time, we may be taking a week off next week, by the way, for our summer holiday. We're not all going away together, but we might be off next week. If so, we'll see you in a fortnight. For now, take care of yourselves. Bye.